Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh, and in this episode, we are going to, for one thing, piggyback off of last week's episode about the people we lose along the spiritual path, and really introduce the Bhagavad Gita in lieu of our upcoming Insight Tier meeting, the first one where we are going to deepen our study of the Bhagavad Gita. So this kind of gets into the first chapter, part of part of Arjuna's despondency, that yoga of dejection, that dejection is also yoga. That feeling of loss and pain is part of the yogic process, and how it, it applies to this loss of people, this moving forward, where we are forced in a lot of ways to leave some people behind, and what that means. I believe that the Bhagavad Gita is actually a guidebook for life. It's very thin. It is not a long book. I mean, obviously it's thicker when you get the commentaries and things like that, but the story itself is very thin. The instructions are very simple. Maybe they're not. I believe it's simple, and especially, I've had wonderful teachers over the years, and, obviously 27 years of reading this book, I've learned a lot. And that's, the point of all of this is to share what I know with you. I've given the Bhagavad Gita just as a story without, I used to have these little thin copies that didn't have any commentary or anything like that in them. And I would give them to people that were, done with their time as a Navy SEAL, done with their time as a Ranger, finished with their time on the SWAT team or as a homicide detective or whatever it was. And I have a little stack of patches that all of these people gave me their patches as if they were letting go of their identity, and often they would say, I don't need this anymore. And not in like a peacenik kind of way, but more in like that chapter's closed and I'm moving forward. The Gita is a beautiful, the song of God is what it means. So, okay. So before we get into all that, go to the website, theinfinitesparkofbeing.com, click or tap the participate donate button. If you enjoy this content, you like what I'm providing, go ahead and feel free to donate money through PayPal or Venmo. If you're interested in participating in any of these groups, you can. You don't necessarily have to sign up for Patreon. You can just send $20 through PayPal or Venmo with your email address, and that will get you on whichever one you want to. But if you'd like to sign up for the Patreon, that is good too. There's 5 tiers total. There's a $1 tier and a $5 tier. Those are just, support and kindness donations that many people have signed up for, which I'm very appreciative of. There's the $10 Journey tier, which gives you access to the first Wednesday of every month. There is the Awake tier, which is $20, and that gives you access to the first Wednesday and the third Wednesday. And then intentionally placed between those is the $30 Insight tier, which gives you access to all 3. And that is our spiritual text kind of study group, where we are going to dive into the allegory and application of the Bhagavad Gita. And that starts this week. So if you're listening to this on Monday, yes, that's when I'm releasing these. So that would be the second Wednesday of every month. And like I said, gives you access to the first and the third. And this Insight tier is between those strategically for a reason. The Journey tier, very rudimentary, basic concepts. The third Wednesday, we dive into the more esoteric understanding of those things and how the esoteric end of it really does apply and how we use that practically. And then there's the study of what it says in the texts, because I've mentioned this before, the bird has to have 2 wings. You can't have the practices. It's like Catholic Mass in the Bible, the Dharma and meditation, puja and the Vedas. You have the intellectual study and the pursuit, as well as the practices that give you the experience. If you have experiences without practical knowledge or the intellectual end of it, then you're at risk of egotism or confusion. If you simply have all of the intellectual knowledge but no experience, what good is that? So those two things are important, and that's what I'm trying to do with this Patreon, is to create a community of everyday people that are spiritually minded. There's also the About button. Click that if you want to book one-on-one time, workshop at your yoga school, give a talk at your yoga school, start a meditation practice, deepen your practice, start a spiritual study or practice of some sort, deepen what you already have. Or if you're interested in thought transformation and restructuring, just tap the About button and read a little bit there. Okay, so last week we talked about letting go of people along the spiritual path. And what I want to say first is that this doesn't mean, there doesn't need to be a formal declaration to anybody that you are now moving forward. But you just do. And I had my own experience with this with an old friend of mine after I recorded that episode. And what is not understood by the person that we are kind of letting go of silently in our own way is that it does hurt us. We don't let go because there's no love there or whatever. It's just that self-preservation is important. If I'm not good, then I can't be good for you. If I'm not healthy for me, I can't be healthy for you. And we have to do what's right for us first. It's that thing with on the airplane, you put your own mask on first, then help everybody else. So that is a painful thing because the mind understands its identity through relationship. A person only knows who they are based on the responses they get from other people, and that's the way they understand themselves in context with the relationship with others. That's self-concept, and we can have several self-concepts, like who I am with certain people isn't who I am with others. Like I might make certain jokes with this friend, I don't make those jokes with that friend, or there's things that videos on Instagram that I'll share with Troy that I don't share with my girlfriend, just because they're, funny boy stuff, right? Like, why is it hilarious to roll a boulder down a hill? It's like, I don't know, I just think it's funny. So there's that. And as it is an outgrowing of people, and that can sound a little prideful, that like I'm just outgrowing you. But whatever it is, there's a shift somewhere, and they don't fit anymore. So that first, part of the Gita, the first chapter where, they're mentioning these people like Bhishma and Drona and Karna and Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra, and you're hearing these names, especially the names of the Kauravas. They each have they mean something. They're a symbol of something, right? Duryodhana, I guess I should start at the very, kind of go back a bit. So you have two teams, we'll say. They're one family, right? They're all related. But you have the Kauravas and the Pandavas. They're all Kurus, right? But let's say we have the Kauravas and the Pandavas. The Pandavas are the 5 brothers, the good guys, who are sons of Pandu, who was originally the king. Dhritarashtra, the blind brother of Pandu, by kind of default became the king. You could look at that as the loss of goodness, because the way Pandu dies is there was a curse put on him that he was to remain celibate, and he gave in to celibacy, to a pious. So he had this kind of pious lifestyle. He gave into it and lost his life, and the kingdom gets lost to the blind king, his blind brother, who isn't a bad person. He's not a bad guy, but he's blind, you know, and at the time that wasn't really didn't make you a good warrior. You're blind, and that's kind of the Shastriya warrior class was the leader class, so, you know, it was going to be a problem. And you can understand the allegory in that, right? That deluded head in the sand self that, you know people like that. You're like that. You know, there's a piece of us that is Dhritarashtra. And then there's Duryodhana, the deluded self. His son, Duryodhana, is just a fucking brat of a human. And you spend the whole Mahabharata thinking, God, I can't wait for him to just fucking get his. So the whole thing starts out with Arjuna and Krishna in the middle of the battlefield, because Arjuna asked Krishna to take me down into the battlefield, let me survey this one last time before this battle starts, because the Pandavas are coming back for the kingdom. They were exiled due to some underhanded dealings of Duryodhana and the brother Yudhisthira's addiction to the game of dice. Yudhisthira represents justice, right? And that always doing the morally correct thing, because his father was the god Dharma. And so there's that loss of, you know, justice or piety again to material competition and all that. So however you lose that piece of you lose it. And now it's Arjuna in the battlefield. The brothers collectively are the spiritual aspirant that wants to clean up their life, that wants to improve their experience of reality. And what happens is Arjuna is standing on the battlefield with Krishna, and he goes and he looks over and he sees Drona and Bhishma, his teachers. You know, Bhishma is the grandfather of the whole thing. He's not related to the boys, but he's this grandfatherly presence that has been with the kingdom forever, been with the family forever. He's very wise. And then there's Drona. Their teacher, their guru, taught them about spirituality and warriorship and all this stuff. And Arjuna's just standing there. He's like, this can't be good. This can't be good to let go of all of this and walk away from these people and kill them, right? Because what that represents is the spiritual aspirant standing on the battlefield of the mind. That's the battlefield of Kurukshetra, the battlefield of the Kurus, which represents the mind. The chariot that Arjuna and Krishna are in is the body. The horses are the senses. Krishna, as the charioteer, represents the higher self. Arjuna represents the scared small self. You know, the piece that's afraid to let go of these things like pleasure and enjoyment, because there may never come along again. And Drona and Bhishma represent memories and the old self and who you were. You know, and I very much identify with this idea of being afraid to let go completely. Like I mentioned before, letting go the side of the pool, losing sight of land, you know. But it's the idea that the spiritual aspirant kills these pieces themselves. You know, like Drona representing the memories, the past, and all that, and just the fear of losing that. You know, you see this a lot when someone, like, I don't know, everything from becoming a vegetarian or a vegan to becoming physically fit or losing an addiction. It's like, well, what is the Super Bowl going? What am I going to do on the 4th of July? You know, I'm not going to be able to sit around and drink with everybody. I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do that. And we drag our feet with cleaning up our own stuff because it's afraid to because we're afraid to let go of who we were. You know, it is scary. You know, those of you that are in relationships with people and you're making this spiritual progress, you know, and they're not, or they're not all in, they're kind of half in or whatever. And it's like, if you go too deep down this, you could lose your relationship, your spouse, you know, your friends, you know. I look back, at one point, there was these moments where I'd plateaued spiritually and then started like a real arduous hike, so to speak. A lot of that happened in my first marriage, where I was like, I had opportunities to study deeply with some, powerful teachers. And I can remember the person I was with saying, you're just better than me now. And they meant that sincerely. And I was like, no. And that statement scared me so much, because that meant that they would leave if I kept pursuing this. So I would do things to show them that I was still the same, person. When the reality is that I wasn't. I wasn't the same person at all. Do pieces of old Keith, old programs live in the mind somewhere? Of course they do. They're there. They don't come up as readily or whatever. And then with even earlier than that, I mentioned this last week where I had a belief in God. Or maybe I mentioned the week before, I had a belief in God. And my friends, that wasn't cool to them, because they're all lazy atheists. I mean, anybody can just fucking do that. It's mentally safer to just not have to contemplate actions or, any of this. But, so I was kind of in private, in secret, like doing my, my stuff, my searching, my whatever. Sorry if you're watching on YouTube, I'm trying to pop my neck. So there is this leaving behind, right? I'd mentioned in the past going to my friend's funeral and sitting across from this friend of mine. And while I was there there was a lot of people there, right? And a lot of it was, people from bands and things from way back. And I'm looking around and I'm like, some were more in the forefront. Like I was more, had more in common with maybe some that I wasn't as close to in the past. The people I was close to in the past were now very much in the background. And everyone was, just angry. And I lost so much of that anger. And that's, it's another thing that I experienced this week with this friend of mine. I don't have that anger anymore. I just don't have it. And I don't want it, I very much this week have felt like Arjuna, that it's scary, because after I talked to this friend, there's I felt sad, sadness and whatnot. And, you lose people. You lose them in various ways. That's the part of that death thing, is that the death is also an allegory. It's not just a bodily death. We die to the old self and we take birth into different thing. I mentioned in the past, Badahari had said to me, when I was like, hey, I'm losing my interest in politics and all this stuff. And he goes, because you got a higher taste. Once you know what really good food tastes like, you don't want a fish fillet sandwich. It's very much like that. We do that with relationships, very much so. And that is the whole first chapter of the Gita, which is what we're going to go over this week in this group, is in this insight group, is, what, like, how fucking scary it is to step forward. I'd shared last night in our group the something that this woman that had been a teacher of mine for a long time, and like literally teaching seminars and stuff that I'd taken, and she goes, it's very lonely out on the edge. And it is, that when you break free of, I also made the joke last night, I feel like I'm about to sound like Teal Swan. For those of you, that's a deep cut YouTube controversial spiritual figure. But once you start to step out of the consensus reality, the material reality, the matrix as they call it, you start to see things a little clearly, even just something as simple as understanding how the human mind works. It's a very lonely place, because now you go to parties, you sit with friends, you do whatever, and they're talking, and you're like, you have nothing to contribute, nothing that they're going to be interested in, and it's very lonely, and you almost have to feign interest in just these mundane things, you know. I can remember being at Super Bowl parties and just sitting there thinking, what are we doing? Like, this is hours of just what the fuck is happening, you know. I don't, you know, it's, you just lose touch with it, and it can be a very lonely feeling. And that's what Arjuna at the beginning of the Gita is really afraid of, that loneliness, to cut off those pieces of himself that he's letting go of. And that's what the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is about, and that's what we are going to go over this week. The second chapter is more about once you've now gained knowledge of the eternal self, you know. So that's what this first group this week is. The Insight tier on Patreon is about that. It's about letting go and the fear that comes with that. So go to the infinitesparkofbeing.com if you're interested in one-on-one time with me for whatever it is. Read through that about page, see what I have to offer you. I'm watching construction mayhem happen on Palm Beach Island. And then if you want to, you know, join these discussions, do it through Patreon or a one-time fee of $20. All right. Check out the shop, buy some t-shirts, some hoodies, tank tops, whatever it is. I love you. I love you. I love you.